panelists on stage and the moderator for this session. And please allow me to introduce the moderator of this session. We have the Professor Kyung-Soon, the founder and representative director of Korean Expert Consulting Group, Republic of Korea. And he's also supervisory board director for the KOSPI-listed Macquarie Korea Infrastructure Funds. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause. Please take your microphone.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. I would say a smart evening, smart afternoon. Having heard enlightening two keynote speakers, I think the word smart is like just hanging in my brain. And well, I did government official job. I did also World Banker. I was a consultant. In fact, when I was working 30 years ago, we heard rarely the word smart. I'm sure that all of you reckon, right? But all of a sudden, the word smart just came up from a springboard. And everybody wants to use smart. And initially, I think the smart was used mainly by companies that sells new products. In other words, smartphones and smart games. And smart something is used to probably advertise the additional functionalities beyond what was adopted, before, for the older products. And and then all of a sudden, the use of the word smart expanded and spilled over to management and policy elaboration and policy-making areas, like smart growth, smart development, and even smart globalization. In fact, in the 80s, 90s, all the time we heard the word global. So it's kind of a fashionable word. Now, smart is the buzzword. Whenever we add smart, and we think that we are cool, it reflects probably futuristic attitude. It may just also mean that you are basically on top of modernity, and so and so forth. So. But as we heard from the keynote speakers, I think the word global, not global, smart, is not clearly defined word in my view, because, for example, the views presented by President O are definitely different from the views presented by Philip, because that's why I invited Philip to sit here, because it was an interesting contrast. And well, I thought about it, and what could really sort of have led to a difference in view between these two intelligent, highly intelligent people. I think it's because of the difference in the definition of a smart or smartness. I think that is what we may want to figure out, and we may want to also discuss during this session. And for all these differences, I see common elements or even common features when we use the word the smart, which is we all talk about the futuristic world or better world, you know, and that means we basically assume a different environmental paradigm. Something is happening. Something is different, and in order to cope with the changes in paradigm, we think about something different and something better. And something better also involves, value judgment. What is better, and what? And as an economist myself, when we talk about something better, we naturally think about something more efficient and something more effective. But smartness is not necessarily the better world in terms of efficiency or effectiveness. I think it also has to address the downside of becoming much more effective and dramatically effective. In other words, we just assume a revolutionary paradigm. If we can be effective gradually, more effective gradually, then the world can cope with it. But when you become dramatically effective and dramatically efficient, then we just have to think about whether that's a good thing. For example, AI and fourth industrial revolution. And what is expected by economists is a world where we don't need 80% of accountants. We don't need 80% of lawyers. And we don't need also repetitive workers in the knowledge industry, because we have a big data, we have AI, we have VR. And is that a good thing? Is a better world? I think that is why we need a Philip to join in. In order to be human-oriented, we may want to challenge the conventional wisdom of smart cities. I think that's the thing. So in other words, in our discussion, or maybe even in defining the smart cities, we have to address the downside of becoming smart. Are we becoming really smart? And we should be able to address the downside. Yeah? And in this session, by the way, in order to address the confusion in terms of defining the smartness, the management scientists in the past had answer from the name itself, the word itself. Smart, anything smart, anything, any policies or and management strategies that are related to smart should be able to contain the elements coming from smart. Now, I'll tell you what it is. First sort of alphabet is S. S means the policy should be very specific. It should not be vague. It should. Otherwise, it's confusing. And the second alphabet is M. M means it should be measurable. If cannot measure, that's called the bullshitting area. The bullshitting universe. Right? And then the third alphabet is A. A means it should be achievable. When we are not talking about the imaginary world where everybody is so happy, so well-fed. Yeah. We cannot just talk about it. It should be achievable. And fourthly, it should be art. Art means it should be relevant. It should be realistic enough. And T means we cannot just have an imaginative world that could exist maybe after our death. after this planet, there is a big bang for this planet. No, we cannot do that. So it should be time-bound. If we don't have these elements of smart, it cannot be smart enough. You know, this is, and finally, I think Philip just made a very good point. We just use the word smart as a very absolute value that we should pursue. But it cannot be an absolute value. It should be a smarter city. Because in some respects, today's cities are pretty smart. It's much smarter than the cities of 10 years ago, for example. So, you know, the question is how smarter we could go and how fast we could go. And then we just also maybe engage strategies based on human change, or maybe the huge capital investment and all those things. I mean, a policy mix type of investment. So having said all these things, and this session has distinguished speakers who can just help all of us understand what smart cities are and what the relevant policies could be. And our first keynote speaker in this session is Ms. Karuna Gopal. She's from India. She is a very experienced gun in smart cities. And that's why she doesn't have even a text to share with us, but you know, in her mind, in her brain, she has a well-structured, you know, the observations and presentation for us. And then we have the Vice President Kalu. In fact, about 3 years ago, we were in the same session. I was also a moderator at that time. And I really admired his in-depth knowledge about, you know, many good subjects. So I think you will just be happy with his views and his presentation. And we have also Professor Chien-Yuan from Taiwan National University, which is as a bureaucratic institution as the Seoul National University. I briefly taught. So he is approaching the issue from the academic sort of point of view and perspective. He prepared nice visuals to share with us. So, and we have then Chien-Yuan. He's also National Taiwan University, right? No. Sorry. What am I talking? You know, believe it or not, we never had a pre-session meeting. We have Mr. Nguyen Viet Long from the fast-growing and fast-evolving country of Vietnam. And I'm told the Vietnamese government is also very much interested in establishing the smart cities and to making the country's major cities smarter. You know, that's what I'm told. Yeah. So we will just listen to views and understand the situations in Vietnam. And finally, but not of least importance, and we invited the Philip, who was the keynote speaker, and his views based on humanity was the first one I heard. And I challenged a little bit after his presentation, saying that technology is not kind of animal that everybody has to enjoy and everybody has to understand. He said that people do not understand technology. That's why it's difficult to approach the same issue purely from technology perspective. But maybe you may address that too when you make a sort of presentation. That technology has been always a monopoly of chosen few. In the past, it was the monopoly of advanced countries. Within also country, it's a monopoly by those who are in the R&D industries, who has patents and so on and so forth. So maybe if we just change the assumption a little bit, and maybe the views could be different. Philip, am I right? Yeah. So I have talked too much. So having said all this, now you're gonna just listen. Let me invite Karuna. Karuna is the first speaker. Let me invite Karuna to make a presentation on the subject.
Thank you. The slide changer, please. It's okay. Good afternoon to the chair and my co-panelists. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm here to speak on the policies for smart cities. Well, my presentation would perhaps be a little bit of a mix between what Professor O's shared and even a bit of what Phillips shared. So let me just start with, some of you remember that when Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of United Nations, very dramatically announced to the world that we have entered the urban millennium, a lot of things started happening. There were projections that the world is going to see several cities and megacities are going to emerge in all parts of the world. And this perhaps is exactly the time when the smart cities wave started attracting the attention of mayors. I would say that basically driven by technology vendors. If you remember very clearly, it was IBM and Cisco that started this. And I was told by several people in technology space that at that particular time, technologies were not doing too well. So they wanted to revive their businesses and they approached the mayors of certain cities and came out with certain opportunities and solutions to run their cities better, and that's when the wave started. So basically everything was vendor driven. The imagination of technology vendors started this whole wave of smart cities. Well, you would see in the last 2 decades that there have been several definitions about smart cities. Some countries call them green, some call them circular, some call them digital. Some even started calling them just cities, cities that give justice. Well, the definitions emerged primarily from the economic models that these countries followed. Some of the countries that looked at circular economy thought of circular cities. Some of them that looked at flat white economy, like the UK, looked at digital cities, etc. So several definitions and a whole bunch of confusion happened. Now today, as we stand, after perhaps almost close to 2 decades, you find certain numbers in the form of report card. They say that, well, there have been improvements in reducing emissions. There have been improvements in creating new jobs. There have been, disability has been addressed, etc. But if you watch very carefully, you notice that these are sporadic, small achievements across the world. No country is able to stand up and say that we have become, no city has been able to stand up and say that we are a totally smart city. And today, in the context of sustainability, it's very important to understand what really makes sense. So let me show you this. Cities across the world have done a bit of improvement, they have deployed technologies, they have achieved a bit, but what they are supposed to achieve, what they are now set out to achieve, are what we call as the triple bottom line. Cities today just cannot be happy by giving economic development. They have to look at the triple bottom line. It is to do with people, it is to do with planet, it is to do with profit, all three. Now, just asking a simple question, how many cities have been able to do that? Recently, there was a report, 2018, a report has been published, and they say that, well, London has been able to achieve a bit on profit and people, but London misses the planet, which means the environmental goals of London have not been met, notwithstanding the fact that it announced itself to be a smart city. Look at Stockholm. The planet goals have been achieved, but the profit and people have not been achieved. Edinburgh, Singapore, profit. Vienna, planet and people. Some of you who have visited Vienna and perhaps have seen how the city is being shaped. Vienna has been seen through even something very interesting like a lens of a gender lens. Apparently, they carried out a study and they requested people, women and men, to share with the authorities how they use the city. So the men said, when we use the streets, we just go to office and we come back. But when women were asked, how do you use the city streets? They thought for a while. And they said, well, in the morning we walk our pets. Then we take our children to the schools. Then I go to the grocers. Then we have to take our elderly for the elderly care, maybe to hospitals. So women are using streets in different ways than men. So Vienna started looking at what we call as the city design through the lens, gender lens. And that's why today it is people-friendly. So Seoul, profit and people. Kuala Lumpur is perhaps the only city that has been rated pretty high on all three parameters. But if you look at other Asian cities in Africa, far from the goal that we're supposed to meet. Well, just stop and think why most of the cities have not been able to achieve the so-called, their avowed goals of becoming smart. The first and the fundamental thing is, if you have seen the smart city game in the last 2 decades, you would notice that most of the cities have set themselves utopian goals, want to really become smart, so they've not been able to achieve it. The second thing is there was a huge amount of hype around it. You know, they were all hyped up, they were branded, they were marketed, so there was disappointment along with that. Some of the cities violated the design principles. So if you see some smart cities, for instance, in India, none of the architects or city planners are involved in the game of smart cities. They're completely kept out of the game. I could say quarantined, they're kept out of the game. So it's just a technology game that is being played. So as you would know, in the last 2 decades, we created ghost cities. In China, some of us know that. We also created, in the name of smart cities, a lot of expectations. People expected a whole bunch of things from smart cities. Then we created NPAs. For instance, in Philip's presentation, the last slide was about bridges that are not going to be used. I mean, huge investments in non-performing assets. There's trust deficit. Now today you announce to a city saying that we're going to make it very smart. The citizens are not going to really seriously accept what you're saying because there's a bit of a trust deficit there. Then we have invaded the privacy of people. Some of the smart cities have not been able to control disaster. I mean, Phillips will agree what happened when the grid was locked for almost close to 10 hours in the United States of America. New Orleans faced a hurricane, even when they had the critical infrastructure monitored with sensors, etc. Then the last and the most important thing is the cities have forgotten the citizen. Citizens have been kept out of the game so far in the last 2 decades. So let's see. Today, if we have to conclude why certain smart cities have not been doing well, the first thing is excess exuberance. There's an enormous amount of hype and too much of talk about it. There's poor regulatory oversight. You would agree that most of the countries have not really thought of regulation when they thought of putting technologies in place. No accountability, herd mentality. Well, Seoul is doing, let Delhi go for it. Delhi is doing, let Mumbai go for it. Let Jakarta go for it. It's herd mentality, you know. And the last one is about a sense of infallibility. Okay, we have technologies with us, we cannot go wrong. So these are the things that kind of gave a bad name to smart cities. So we are here to rectify, and we are here perhaps to understand what went wrong and what has to be done. So today in this context, going forward the next decade perhaps, we have to look at what went wrong. The first thing that went wrong is we looked at only technologies. There was the entire landscape of smart cities was littered with jargon. I'd say littered with jargon. You talk about sensors, smart sensors, geolocation devices, cameras, big data, IoT, connected IoT, robotics, AI, today for computing. It's just the whole place is littered with a lot of jargon. So that caused a bit of a problem because we saw only through the lens of technology. The second thing we did was, I think some of the cities had absolutely no clue on striking a balance between technology and design. They were clueless. For instance, just to give you an example, take a look at what technology evangelists would say and what design people will say. The tech guys will say, let's go for driverless cars. We've been listening to driverless cars talk for a very long time. But the green evangelists will say, drive less cars. I mean, I'm sure someone from Europe will agree with this. You need to drive less cars. The tech guys will say augmented reality, but the design guys will say ground reality. Look at the ground. Do you actually need to go for augmented AR and VR? Sensor and network. The design guys will say, network sensibly, you don't need a sensor to tell you that things are overflowing. You talk to the manager in the utility, you will know that there is a problem. Internet of everything. They say interact with everyone. Open data, these people say open places. So we've not been able to strike a balance between the tech guys and the design guys, and that's exactly what went wrong with the smart cities so far. Another important thing is our inability to see that we are connected. The entire globe is connected. We think that I'm in UK, you are in India, etc. But actually it's all completely connected and the boundary lines are diffuse and porous. For instance, you look at this. The world is hyper-connected today. Hyper-connected today. And therefore, it has become hyper-vulnerable. Anything that has this kind of connection is also bound to be hyper-vulnerable. For instance, today, if I stand in front of you and tell you this story, that poverty will cause crime. Will you accept it or no? Poverty will cause crime. Will you accept it or no? Yes, because poverty normally creates a bit of a crime. But today, if I stand in front of you and tell you that butterflies, birds, and reptiles, if not taken care of, will lead to terrorism and violence. Will you accept it? You may not, because it's not really visible to the naked eye. So let me give you the connection. If you're not taking care of birds, bees, and reptiles, it will lead to ecological imbalance. If you have ecological imbalance, it will lead to less rainfall. Less rainfall will cause food insecurity. There won't be any food. And without food, people will be distressed, they'll be anguished, and that will cause crime. And crime unattended will lead to violence, and violence will lead to terrorism. So today, the link between taking care of birds, reptiles, and bees to the world not being safe has to be understood. So I think smart cities today are not able to do this, linking of these things. So prima facie, this is another big problem that smart cities have not looked at. One is the sprawl. The cities are growing bigger in size. We have never looked at integrated planning. For instance, I don't know how many of you come from cities that have had land use planning married to transportation planning. We made mistakes with privacy protection. We couldn't understand public-private partnerships in terms of risk allocation. We made mistakes there. We made structural innovation is something that we've not been able to do. We could bring in a lot of technological innovation, but we couldn't understand how to bring structural innovation into our existing huge, cities and our structures, organizations. The last one is future investment and risk mitigation. So looking at foreign direct investment could be an issue here. So finally, the biggest mistake we made was, where is the citizen? The whole game of creating smart cities is to put the citizen right in the center, because the citizen is the raison d'etre. As we say in French, raison d'etre is reason for existence. So without the customer, can a company exist? Customer is the raison d'etre of a company. The same way, citizen is the raison d'etre of a city. So if he is not there, what is the point? There is no city. So we forgot the citizen and we made it everything top down, and that perhaps was the biggest mistake we made. So today, they're trying to rectify and ask questions about, what do you want? Going to citizens saying, what do you dream of? What do you expect? These are things that are happening. Well, the future of smart cities, quickly, we cannot plan for smart cities without understanding the larger economic scenario of the world. No way, because most of the vendors come from the developing world that has slowed down substantially. So understand that we do have issues in terms of the global economic scenario. So go for sensible planning of your smart cities. My guess is, as we go along, the smart cities will be less explorative. We made them experimentative, we explored a lot. But I think going forward, we will stop with our experiments and exploration. We will stop the pilot, let one pilot succeed. I think this is going to stop eventually. We will turn inward looking. We need to understand the country, let's say the country's priorities. We will look at bespoke models. We will not take something that works in Paris and put it in Jakarta. We will not do that. We will have to evolve our own bespoke models and best practices, next practices. Finally, we'll also look at our practices. What has our city done before? What was our legacy assets that we created? So finally, we will also, as I said in the end, we will value legacy. So we're not going to just mimic, ape all the other countries. We'll start looking inward, introspect, understand what are the assets that we have as a city, bring them back and start understanding how to create a smart city around our own assets. Well, the transition that you will see, my friends, is very simple. It was technology driven at one time. Going forward, we will see it will be human-centered. The human being will be at the center of everything. We saw economic development, making money, profit was the motive behind smart cities. But now we will see triple bottom line. As I said, economic development, environmental protection, and equity. How do you include everyone? How do you include senior citizens in your city? How do you include women? How do you include the marginalized, the poor? How do you include the disabled? That is going to be the future of smart cities. The transition you will see will be from developed world to developing world. Because the developing world you will see in South Asia and Africa's, we are experiencing all 4 quadruplets at the same time. For instance, we are seeing globalization, we are seeing industrialization, we are seeing urbanization and motorization. All the 4 coming together. And that is happening in the developing world. And all the 4 industrial revolutions the developing world is seeing. So that's where the smart cities will develop, evolve, create best practices, and perhaps give a lot of knowledge for future. So the early movers, like the West, will not be the focus of discussion. They will be the late movers. People in Asia mostly will be the late movers, and that'll be the topic of discussion and focus for future of smart cities. The policies will be, we will move away from forecasting. I'm sure some of you have been involved in city planning. We went through this whole process of scenarios, scenario building. I think that's going to go. So what we will do is we will look at backcasting. In fact, in 2 of the keynotes, they have talked about it. What is backcasting? You have a vision in mind. You want to achieve it, so you think of ways to achieve it. The pathways to achieve that will be the future of smart cities. We will move away from hard infrastructure and start focusing on what we call as the soft infrastructure. What is soft infrastructure? Some of you would know that China recently, when it went through economic stress, it went to International Monetary Fund and sought funds. And what did IMF tell China? It said that we will give you fund, we will bail you out, but don't create marquee infrastructure, don't build airports, marquee roads, glamorous and glitzy buildings. Put the money for governance. Put the money for soft infrastructure, that is governance, reforms. Get your act together, clean up your institutions, become more efficient and effective. I think going forward, the smart cities will move towards that. Then the smart cities will move away from the mint fresh greenfield cities. I don't think the countries have an appetite for building new cities because we have seen failure stories in almost every country. Be it Masdar, be it Songdo, we have invested, be it Gift City in India, we haven't received much. So the future, my friends, is going to be in retrofits. How do you retrofit an existing city? Take Manila, the chaos that it is, but we're going to build it back. So the silos. So we'll move away from silos to interministerial collaboration, etc. The national policies, my friends, this is very important. Every country today has a national policy which has a bit of urban policy embedded in that because of the rapid urbanization. So the future is going to be somewhat like this. So the last 2 slides are about policy integration. I have worked quite extensively in the area of policy and integration, and most of our urban policies are fragmented, managed by multiple agencies. So we need to look for integrating the small pieces of policy that are lying in different departments. We have to be very careful about that. So going forward, you will see that policy integration has to happen at sectoral level. It has to happen horizontally between different departments and ministries. And we need to integrate vertically too. For instance, the national policy has to resonate to the state policy to the city policy. Unless we have this, for instance, in technology, somehow we managed it. We have fusion centers. We pick up data, we try to marry and get value out of this, but we don't seem to have the policy fusion centers anywhere. So I think going forward, that is very important. The new age practices, as have been shared by both my other keynote speakers, like for instance, bottom-up innovation. Ask the citizens, let them give you solutions. So create those living labs, exploration, experimentation, hubs, innovation, that is going to be there. The platforms, again, for knowledge sharing is also very important. So the last slide is very important. This is about Don't mimic, don't ape, because each city is at a different level of evolution. We have to understand where we are. And that's how the future of smart city is going to be. You're not going to mimic, you're not going to ape, you're not going to be looking at global solutions, you're looking at your own solutions based on customized, simplified, and prioritized. In conclusion, I'd like to give you two simple examples. These are very important. I have seen, take contextualized. For instance, today, we spoke at length about artificial intelligence. I'm sure tomorrow you will hear about it too. Just to say that everything is getting contextualized. The AI policy of different countries, if you see, take China and United States. Their AI policy is to do with military and army. Take Canada and South Korea. Most of the AI is being looked at for research and development. Take the artificial intelligence policy for UK. It's deployed mostly in healthcare. Take, for instance, UAE. They're looking at improving their government systems. Look at Japan. It's for productivity. Look at Germany. They are looking at work-life balance. So deploying AI for work-life balance, that's their priority. Look at India. We are looking for inclusion. So deploying AI for inclusion is the priority of my country. So it is completely contextualized. Unlike in the earlier days when America did something India wanted to do. We are not like that anymore. And so is the developing world. And the most important is about prioritization. Is that your priority at all? Just to give one analogy, if you have ever been taken to ER, health, you had health problems, and you were taken to an emergency room, there will be the doctor comes, and the doctor will be given a lot of reports on, let's say, my liver function, my kidney function, my blood reports, my everything. But the doctor is going to put away all the reports. Haven't you seen that? He's going to just not say, don't look at it, and he's going to go for my 3 vitals. What are my 3 vitals? He's going to check if my temperature is 98.4. The second thing he's going to do is he's going to look for my BP. Is it blood pressure? Is it 120/80? The third thing is he's going to look at my pulse. Is it 72 beats a minute? These are the 3 vitals of a human being. And for a city, I have seen that the 3 vitals are very important. As we go forward, you need not do enormous amount of research and too many studies and reports being thrust on decision makers. What they have to see is the 3 vitals. Is there economic vitality in the city? Are you able to promote job creation? Are you creating a hybrid business ecosystem where big businesses, small businesses, SMEs live together with the triple helix that was talked about? The second thing is environmental protection. Are we looking at the environmental assets, the ecological assets? The second vital is that. The third vital is inclusion and equity. Is everybody, including the have-nots, the poor people, the neglected people, the people who've been isolated, quarantined so far, are they being pulled into the system? So these are the 3 vitals. Going forward, smart cities will be a marriage between economic vitality, environment protection, and equity. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karuna. First, let me apologize that I didn't have her like a presentation text, which is very comprehensive and far-reaching. I'm sure that she is constrained by time, and maybe later we will just have your text for the benefit of also the audience. And well, she brought a reality check to us on how difficult it is to elaborate and execute a strategic approach to the development issue at large, especially to carry on any policies to develop smart cities, right? And I think this forms a good base for our panel discussion. And in fact, I have one question from the floor, but I will just sort of defer it to the completion of our panel discussion, and I'll open the floor from the questions from the floor. And our next speaker will be Dr. Kalu, and he just provided abstract, so I'm sure it's going to be, because we have now 55 minutes, and the Professor Kalu, I will give you 8 minutes, if you don't mind.
8 minutes.
Yeah.
Pull it. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
5 minutes will be enough to share with you ideas embedded in 17-page paper. I was given the task of looking at policies that undergird smart cities. And the first thing that occurred to me was, if some cities are smart, what does that make other cities? Are the cities smart or the people smart? I couldn't answer the question, so I decided to explore truly the dimension of policy that could make it possible for us to have what we call smart cities. So, while some contemporary cities already have some aspect of artificial intelligence, everything you have heard up to this point is embedded one way or the other in the paper. So I'm going to not read the whole paper. I'm just going to give you some things for us to have conversations with. Efforts to transition contemporary cities to fully fledged smart cities that run largely on AI, software, and hardware will challenge everything we have come to know and believe are the domain of human beings. I'm interested in exploring the extent to which, as self-interested contemporary humans, we are likely to agree to use AI to work with people or organizations that have control and power over codes and algorithms to change our lives by implementing collaborative, coordinated policies with minimal challenges to our common humanity. Jamie Sustand gives characteristic of smart city. He says, quote, "Smart cities are embedded with dense networks of sensors that allow authorities to keep track of a dazzling array of variables, from noise, temperature, light, air toxicity, and utility usage, to the movement, location, and activity of vehicles and people. Software powered by codes and algorithms," end quote. Software powered by codes and algorithms already activate devices that track our movement, our moods, locations, and speech across countries like China and Israel. Some of these devices are also tools used by intelligence agencies in democratic and non-democratic cities to gather information on their citizens. For example, drones are capable of tracking a person in crowded location until they find the exact individual. Some drones are also deployed to scan and provide data on the conditions of food crops in large farms and monitor plant diseases. Some artificial intelligence already have the capacity to save lives, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, because they can process data faster than the humans and therefore are able to make more accurate, precise, objective decisions. For me, while advanced machine learning can help us become smarter, I have series of questions that undergirded by my belief that everything we do is about human beings. Everything we do is about people. How will AI impact governance and collective decision-making that have been the staple of human collaboration? What are the likely effects of these smart sensors on human relations, especially in the context of choices that individuals make in the privacy of their homes that others may not approve of? At the same time, how might this coexistence with machines affect human employment in intense data reading texts or tasks like X-rays, mortgages, corporate tax processing, etc.? I'm not concerned that humans will be displaced from their jobs. My concern here is how those humans who control codes and algorithms are likely to deploy AI for non-sustainable communal purposes, like intentionally defrauding the public treasury without communities' recourse to recovering their resources because the code and algorithm controller or tech firm may be the only one who knows how to and when to deploy the code. At the rate of technological development and machine learning that is occurring across industrialized states, how likely is it that military decisions will begin to rely on AI because predictions will be more accurate and efficient? When such a reality is normalized, what then becomes the role of government and governance? To what extent will wars become merely data mining and calculations? Will the final decision for war then be based on which state has the tools to win without regard to their target? How will machine-assisted decision-making impact human conditions when those with genocidal intent are in control of or deployed for the levers of government or merely in control of codes and algorithms? These are not rhetorical questions. One only has to think of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Armenia, the Holocaust, indigenous people in Americas and Australia, Biafra, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Rwanda. The list goes on. Humans did say once before, never again, only to shy away from the responsibilities when the victims were different or posed inconvenient choices for those who have the power to change current algorithms or access to them decide to do nothing. With code and algorithm-powered AI, the opportunity now exists for such neglect and irresponsibility without direct attribution. You can simply now say, the AI made me do it. A number of issues are discussed in the paper. I do talk indeed about politics and political bargaining processes that undergird what we normally call in political science policy. But because of time, let me just go to the concluding part of this paper, because for me, this is important. It also has embedded in it part of my recommendation, which is very simple. In the movie I, Robot, Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics decrees that, 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey orders given it by human beings except when such orders will conflict with the first law. 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. However, while Hollywood has the potential to entertain, it sometimes provides deep insight on the human condition through movies. In the case of the movie I, Robot, one of the robots refused to follow the 3 laws of robotics because it had been coded and equipped with algorithms that allow it to have empathy and to disobey and even harm humans. The challenge that codes and algorithms raise for humans is real because it threatens to change the way we live and understand life and living. While technology is an enhancement of our lives, policy frameworks that humanizes these new devices are very lacking. Indeed, it is not even clear that average citizens have options. The deck has already been stacked by tech firms and government against citizens. Therefore, I propose two simple approaches that might get the conversation started. First, given different economic capabilities of states and regions, having a global conversation on policy framework to bring AI and other smart cities into existing law will not be helpful. What is needed are regional conversations framed around what needs to be culturally preserved in each region, and based on that, establish a rule collectively enforceable that no tech firm would have permission to conduct business in the region without adherence to the cultural markers identified as sacrosanct by the collective will of the people in the region. Second, school curricula will need to emphasize the interdisciplinary relationships between humanities and sciences as basis for future leaders to know when certain technological advances need to be reevaluated because they threaten what makes us human. Think about Boeing 733 Supermax. The lives lost did not need to be lost. Human lives should not be left to software, code, and algorithms, because when they fail, the catastrophe hits home on humans, not machines. One of my closest friends was on the flight in Ethiopia. What we think about and how we relate to our thought clearly have consequences for the type of knowledge we produce. The anomie that has been in existence in modern society, separating us in preference for sometimes inanimate objects, is partially responsible for the proliferation of technologies that promise to challenge our human dignity. To me, this was captured best in the 1997 Apple advertisement. That's the year I got my PhD. I remember it very well, and it reads, "Here is to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They are not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you cannot do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." End quote. Let's hope the next generation of thinkers and inventors will be educated sufficiently across disciplines to marry their humanity with projected technological inventions. When that becomes our reality, all of us will be able to look forward to living wholesome lives in communities that are enhanced but not threatened by the technologies that we dare to build. Smart cities or old cities, we all, as humans, must coexist. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelechi. It took 15 minutes, but it was worth. And I shared his concern in view of what happened in Korea. For example, in Korea, still the shared transportation is not really sort of up to the global standard. And the Korean regulators were discussing it, and taxi drivers were organized to oppose it. And even one taxi driver poured kerosene and put fire, to his body and committed suicide. And the regulation got delayed. whenever I travel to the Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, Singapore, they had an excellent shared transportation system, so Grab. And I don't think the Grab is based on big data and the state-of-the-art, maybe VRs and yeah. But in Korea, it's not possible. There will be so many people who will be displaced, and probably politicians may not be put up with the pressure also from the market in some ways. So that is, I think, is what Dr. Kalu is trying to arrive at. And having said that, now we'd like to listen to Dr. Lin, and who will speak on how the Taiwanese engaged private sector to make the cities smarter. Dr. Lin?
Here, I got it.
Yeah, you have also 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Song. Good afternoon, everyone here. Actually, I prepared the PowerPoint for 25 minutes. So I tried to come down to 8 minutes, all right. So here we like to share you. First of all, I have to thank you, Professor Ken, for this opportunity to come to learn and to share the experiences and knowledges about this in this special occasion. And my topic is about the PPP. I'm sorry, the PPP is not what Karuna said, the people, planet, and the profit. This is the public and private partnership, all right? So, which is very close to the what Professor O this morning said. You have the helix model, triple helix model, that you need to, all sectors work together to get the smart city. And I have to follow that kind of things or thoughts. One thing I have to clarify is that very often people are confused by Taiwan and Thailand, all right? So I have to say that I come from Taiwan, not Thailand, all right? So this island, I think you know that we quite active and productive in the manufacturing of IT devices, equipment for that, so you know that. And the thing is that for the cities or smart cities in Taiwan, we take that as a national policy. So all kinds of smart city solutions or applications being developed and stimulated and encouraged by the country or the national government. And of course, people are talking about the human, the people. These applications are developed not for the software itself, for the people. And of course, for the better quality of the life, for the more efficiency of the economy and things like that. So these are the solutions we're looking at. Now, since Taiwan is very small, okay, so you have such a situation. The central government has more power, more money, everything. And the local governments are weak. And of course, like Philip said, the local government, they do not have adequate knowledge of people, knowing the IT technology, that kind of thing. So in terms of the policy, the central government is kind of dominated, leading the direction for that. And for that, the Taiwan government take the smart city as one of the technology policies. And the policy report is called the Digi Plus, okay? And you can have read that on the proceedings in paper. So about the similar philosophy or structure, you have the ICT infrastructure and all applications, and of course, you have to develop. There are three important things. One is about the legal environment. A kind of response to Karuna said, with the land use control, almost every innovative applications, you are illegal, okay, in terms of the land use control, of the labor, the regulation, things like that. So that's a big problem. And the other thing is about that, how to educate the people. So those are the things encouraged and led by the central government. And actually, the PPP approach is not the first time. It's kind of an evolution. At the very beginning, like every country or every city, all the policies aiming at the hardware development. It's very technology-driven. And then you change your mind. You said, well, we should be more information-driven. And now we said that we should have the human-centric, people-driven approach for that. And even the development model should be the PPP approach. So this is what I'm talking today. And with this, you'll see that from the top-down approach, since I said the central government has all the money, all everything, all the power, so they can ask or they can list out the questions or tasks they want to be done and ask for proposals from the private corporates or technology companies. All right, that's one way. And the other way is that they designate some cities or some areas as the test ground. So within that area, it's okay, not necessary to be legalized, but you have the special right to do that. And so the local government will cooperate with the private corporations. And that's very important. And that's the point I would like to make. Because before, the policy is that the all city governments or local governments, they have to prepare the matching fund so that to receive the subsidy from the central government. But now the situation or the rule has changed. It says that the private corporation, you have to get the cooperative permission from the local government, say what kind of questions or what kind of problems we can solve for you. And we get the money from the central. And at the end, our product, the outcome, would be commercialized. And to make money from outside, maybe overseas market or different cities. So by so doing that, the poor cities, although they don't have financial support for the matching fund, now they be able to cooperate with the private corporations or the private sectors for the development of the all applications. And that's the key point I will try to make. And after this, I almost finished the presentation, all right? So this is a structure you will see that from the both ways. And by so doing that, I would say, from my viewpoint, okay, very practical, it's very useful. Because before, not only the total projects, number of the projects increased, but also that you will see that the poor cities, now they are doing the smart city projects and all kinds of applications. Very quickly, that a couple of examples they've been doing, that the smart parking. Parking is almost very difficult for every city, and so by this way, then they solve the parking problems, the smart street light, with the lighting, you control the light very smartly to save energy. And also, they have the monitor layer, so they can have the collection of the flow, the traffic flow and the temperature, the quality of the air. Everything can be done within that light pole. So you save a lot of things with these applications. And air quality by air technologies for the industrial parks, so you know how to do emergency reaction to that. And even they have the softwares, a sensor for the adults with the hammers. Okay, so they are very easy to get lost and how to find them back. So if you have a ring for them, and with this IoT, so it's easy to get back. And also for the UAV, for the agriculture, for the rural areas, they suffer a lot of the insufficient labor supply for that. And it's important to spread the, for the agriculture to the, how you call that, not the drug, it's insect killing, that kind of things. So by UAV, it's okay, it's safe. Safe and safe. No dangerous and also save the labor. So that's very smart. And to do that, in addition to the government funding and mechanisms like that way, also the private sectors do a lot of things. And this is one of the things we work together with the TCA, the Taipei Computer Association. By this way, I go through very quickly. Every year, we do a survey to monitor, a kind of inventory, what kind of or what status the smart city applications currently in every local city, at the local city level. So we do that every year to check that which city is doing good and what kind of applications people are doing that. So by such kind of survey, we found out every year we are making progress. And the most important that because of this, we also find out the policy, what I said, is very useful. Because poor cities now, they have improved the promotions for that. And so we have all kinds of efforts to encourage all these governors or mayors or even those private company directors. And every year there's a smart city expo in Taipei. I suppose that some of you attend that before. This is one they did in 2009, in March. Okay, and another one is coming soon, next March. So I welcome you to join me and to come to see me in Taipei. I look forward to seeing you, all right? So also another thing is that the distinguished awards for people, because the awards I mentioned before, all are for the application systems, for the corporations or the agencies, but not for individual. But for this one, my institute or my association award is to recognize the contribution of that special people. So these are the things we may do in. See you in Taipei. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Lin. Whenever we hear smart city, we always tend to think so big, like a big investment, big infrastructure. But I'm sure that Taiwanese cases may sort of provide a good example to our two speakers who are concerned about the humanity failure in some ways. I think thank you very much, Dr. Lin. This could offer a good sort of the base for discussions later. Thank you. And now I will turn to our Vietnamese, the gentleman who must also give us similar examples done in Vietnam. And let me sort of invite, one thing I haven't mastered is the way to remember names. And honestly, I don't remember even Korean names well. So my friends' names. Huh? Yeah, Long, yeah. Okay, good, he's Long. So thank you very much. Now, floor is yours.
We're all human.
I have 8 minutes.
We're all human when it comes to names.
So good afternoon. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank UNESCO and WTA to give me a very nice opportunity to be here to share about the policies of smart city and very nice case study in Vietnam. This is my honor. Normally, everyone agrees that the smart city is a worldwide trend today, particularly for the regions who has a strong resources in economy, in finance, or in manpower. However, for emerging regions who has a very limited resources, is it reasonable and feasible to think about building a smart city? And if yes, which approach? And we need to care a lot about achievable and also realistic, what Kyung already mentioned. So today I would like to share with you a case study of Binh province in Vietnam, so emerging country, where I have also opportunity to participate on the project Smart City. So 20 years ago, Binh is a very poor region with traditional agriculture based. But after the revolution of industrialization, Binh today is one of the strongest, richest region in Vietnam for industry and economy. And today, based on the growth of GDP, And also the fourth industrial revolution, Bình Dương one more time would like to make the second revolution from the current traditional manufacturing to the high-tech manufacturing and service, and of course creating a creative community and setting a ground for knowledge and digital economy. So Bình Dương called this kind of project Bình Dương Smart City Project, and we collaborate with the Eindhoven city in Netherlands in 2015 to do it. So how we do it? In fact, this new model brings to Bình Dương province a lot of success. I can say unbelievable success in social economy. And as a result, last year in 2018, Bình Dương is selected to be one of the 21 regions in the world who has the most suitable strategy to develop the smart city according to Intelligent Community Forum. It's Smart 21 that Dr. Lin already mentioned in the National Taiwan policy. So in fact, Bình Dương create a clear vision and make its own concept of smart city to be sustainable with their willing and their status quo. For Bình Dương, a smart city is a connected, dynamic, creative ecosystem in which all are continuously improved, optimized, innovated in sustainable way. That is smart city. So to be clear, Bình Dương is following closer to the concept of intelligent community instead of smart city. When the word smart is replaced by the word intelligent, which is more human approach, and the word city is replaced by the community to show the importance of interaction between people, and also, showing the people-centric approach, as Karuna already mentioned, that for us, we also believe the citizen is a raison d'être of the smart city. So through the Smart City project, Bình Dương learn and apply from Eindhoven, the triple helix model. We all know about that, very similar to the WTA approach. And we also create a very adaptive system, like the Charles Darwin said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. Is it the one that is the most adaptable to change will survive. So Bình Dương also focus on international partners, for example, with Daejeon City, with WTA, with Chungnam University, etc., to exchange experience, resources, and create collective efforts and share. As Stephen Jobs said, creativity is just connecting things. We also create an action plan, but we call it a Bình Dương Navigator, which how all the units in the province can freely propose concrete actions in the right direction. So in this occasion, I would like to share with you some relevant examples. So 3 examples. So beside many classical examples of application of technology Bình Dương did during last 3 years, I would like to give you 3 more special examples. How the province reduced the limit of resources by using the community power and profiting the position of emerging region to develop their economy and society through the smart city strategy. And it's very PPP, close to Karuna and Lim. By chance, I give 3 PPP examples. The first one, when people talk about a smart city, we certainly talk about ICT application, it's natural. But in one of our small city in the province, exploit also a very nice project. As they have many small places, usually used for little commerce, now they decide to, during the last 2 years, to transform 30 of those small places to become a green park and make the whole city greener, and particularly create a community open place for people to interact in their district. So it's a very impactful project for citizens at that time. The second example is some years before, one university in Binh province tried to build up the incubator, and it failed. Today, Binh make different approach. We prepare an ecosystem for startup to get the support from the entire region through the Smart City project. We support our universities and organizations to build up not only incubator, but also Fab Lab, Tech Lab, Living Lab, Innovation Center, new education program to promote the entrepreneurship in all of our universities, and also STEM education for children, new policy for startup, etc. And Binh also promote the laboratory cooperating between university and enterprises. For example, the lighting lab between the Eastern International University, a very local university, with a multinational corporation, Philips. So after 2 years starting with the support of the whole community, some Binh Fab Lab and incubator even reached the international level and forming some new enterprises with millions of dollars of revenue. So many of them already re-contribute on the citizen life of Binh province to make more livable, sustainable, and more efficient in work and life. And maybe in your city, developed city is something normal, but for a province with traditional manufacturing and without startup culture, is really a good starting point, right? And the last one example is before, when we want to promote investment, Binh usually organize business trip abroad, and it costs enormously, already. So today, Binh changed our strategy. We promote the potential through the Smart City program, and we apply the strong international network related with Science Tech City, Smart City, such as the Intelligent Community Forum, like Taiwan National Policy, and also the World Trade Center. And also particularly, we are very honored and happy to join the WTA last year. So with that base, we also attract several worldwide level conferences in our province. For example, last year we organized 2 important international events, the Horasis Asia and particularly the WTA 20-year ceremony with the Global Innovation Forum. And these kind of events bring to us the last year 1,000 of leaders of companies, cities, universities, and create an unbelievable international eco and bring us many new business and cooperation and investment. And we also work with WTA after the ceremony to build up the new concept of Science Tech Industrial Park. It's a hybrid context, a concept between Science Tech Park and Industrial Park to adapt the need and the characteristic and current status quo of Binh province. So with a very limited time, I just try to share with you a case study of an emerging region, Binh, how they are doing the smart city and building the intelligent community, promoting innovation, community efforts and shares, and finally use the smart city as a direction to develop very successfully its economy and society with sustainable way. Please, it is my honor to exchange more with you during the discussion time. Thank you.
Thanks, Nguyen. As we all know, the Vietnamese cities are they're rapidly evolving in all respects. It's one of the fastest growing economy with a lot of changes in cities. And likewise, I think it's the good place to experiment with different approaches to a smart city. I will keep my fingers crossed for the country. Now, we had one Korean presenter in the list, but somehow at the last minute, he couldn't make it. And it's a pity that we couldn't present the Korean case here. Please refer to the copy of the presentation materials he prepared to understand the Korean case. Now, finally, among our panelists, I'd like to invite Philip to present his views on probably on what he heard from our original speakers. I'm sure he has a lot to say about the approaches. In fact, in Korea, probably the Koreans emphasize more technology rather than human resources, because in Korea we have probably the most militant labor union, and they just sort of take care of themselves, and we maybe our policymakers may not need to pay attention to them. I mean, this is my own interpretation, but that could be the case. Anyway, now I will just invite Philip to speak a few words about.
How much time is? I turned it off. Okay. How much time between us and dinner? How much time do we have?
We have altogether 13 minutes if we finish by 5, but maybe you could have 10 more minutes, huh?
45 minutes? Okay. Don't worry, I am not long, I think. Thank you. It was a brilliant panel, and I appreciated the fact that I felt that everybody had a real interest in their citizens and human beings, and despite our earlier conversation, I am not against technology. I mean, I know that can come across that way. I've actually managed big technology projects. It's just that, and I can't say this enough, cities don't understand the technology. And it's just, you know, coming from background where I've worked with technology companies, like I said, Huawei, IBM, Microsoft, all of these companies, there's just a real gap in knowledge between what the cities understand and what the technology companies understand. And that's really the point I'm trying to make, is that all of us as influencers need to spend time educating cities about how to manage the technology. And I think, you know, Kung said this, and I appreciated it. Not everybody needs to know how to run a database or program in a city, but they do need to be in a place where they're not afraid. And I deal with a lot of cities that are actually afraid of starting the smart journey because they don't understand technology and they think that they're going to be taken advantage of. So there's a huge learning curve. But I do want to say this, and then I'm going to go back to our panelists because I think they have a lot to add. I really appreciate something Mr. Long said. I really appreciated your case study, but I want to make this point. He said we had an incubator and it failed. And we learned from that and we did it differently and had an ecosystem. And it's really unusual, let alone in Asia or a city official, to admit that something failed. And so I really want to congratulate you on that bravery. It is, it's unusual. And you know, my dealing with NGOs and cities and governments is that they won't admit to failure. But what you really said that I appreciated was not that you failed, but that you made the failure matter. That you learned from that failure and then you went and did something different. And that, if there's any lesson that anybody could take from this panel, humbly I would say, is that admit your failures and then go do it differently. Because if you don't, you'll just keep repeating. So, I mean, that's the one thing that I'd like to reinforce from Mr. Long's presentation, which I really appreciated. So with that, why don't we have the rest of the panel? I've talked a lot, and I just wanted to make the point that I wasn't against technology.
Actually, I'd like to respond, but I will just give opportunities to other panel members. And maybe we'll have discussions among ourselves. Maybe each of us just address question to other panel members or speaker, starting from, who will start first?
I'd like to endorse what Philip said just now. After his presentation, I think a whole bunch of people thought that he was against technology, but he is not. I mean, he is someone who's perhaps seen the Smart Cities Act play out in different countries, and he realizes now technology is an enabler. Technology is necessary, but it's not enough. It's important to have the human beings work alongside the technology. And he's also added something very important about capacities. It is true that we have seen smart cities evolve up close in my own country, not only in India, but in other parts of the world. It is very difficult to educate the municipal officials on what is a smart city, how do you define the contours, what could be potentially the role of technology, how do you put a committee or a panel to do due diligence with the vendors who come with enormous amount of options and solutions and thrust everything at you, but you need to have competencies to evaluate these proposals, see whether they make sense, and look at whether your city needs it or not. So I think it's a fantastic balance between human capital, people who understand the whole story of what you need, and how you select those people and the vendors with the kind of options that you have.
Yeah, perhaps I may offer my own view on this at this stage. Maybe we may think about the maybe potential basis for difference in understanding. Maybe in the country where Philip is from, majority of population already sort of have certain level of technology, I would say familiarity. Most of the people have iPads and they know how to use them, and so maybe additionality doesn't have much value. I mean, they don't need it, so they are not, unless they do it, it's possible. But in a country like any developing country, the level of technology sort of, held by the public may not be that high. So decisions can be maybe top-down, whereas
a little top-down.
In your country, the decisions could be, bottom-up, more bottom-up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, respectfully, I see this problem everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Edmonton 2 weeks ago, like I said. They're probably one of the smartest cities in North America. And they've actually got people assigned, like innovation officers, resiliency officers, digital enablement officers. And I was really impressed with, even at the second level, of how people understood. We had a big workshop around data use cases and how do you add data to make something more successful. But I'll be honest with you, just next time you go into a workshop or conference, ask people how many people have actually worked on a data project.
Yeah.
Like, how many people in this room have worked on a data project? A real live data project? Just raise your hands. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay. In my experience, it's about 10%, maybe 15% across the board. And unless you've actually worked in a data project, you don't understand it. And so people use big data all the time, big data. They don't understand what they're talking about. I mean, just that's my experience, okay? And I was that way for a long time too, until I started managing the projects. The other thing that you find in big smart city conferences is nobody understands finance. How many has actually done a finance? How many people in this room have actually managed an infrastructure project or a smart city finance?
Very important point, very important point.
1, maybe 2, okay. So again, those are levels of experience that are needed at the city level that you don't have. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. I don't have to say anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is no definite answer from, so maybe we'll just move to next panel speaker.
Let me just say something that is so simple, sometimes we miss it. Technology is an idea. It is not this or this. That's why people like me think that we need to understand the idea through the way we organize our communities and the relationship between that and education. It's an idea. If you don't cue in, or if you miscue to the idea, you continuously will be behind. You will not understand other people's agenda. For example, to what extent is the drive for smart cities, the drive for artificial intelligence, a function of trying to change the way graying societies live and function? To what extent is this project really about the next phase for communities that are not able to replenish their societies? If we understand that, what are the societies or cities or countries with demographic advantages doing for the next phase? Because if you look across Africa, I have some of my brothers and sisters sitting here. Universities across the continent are separate from the communities. They are not integrated. I like to see one. The cities, or rather the communities, the local government, have no way of generating resources internally. Everybody goes to the federal government.
Yeah.
So what kind of
Partnerships.
reorganization, rethinking that generates idea that really transforms life? I repeat, whatever we are doing is really about people's lives. And if we are not adding value to it by how we approach policies, we're wasting our time.
Yeah,
Can I
think that's the problem. When it comes to reality, we face so many issues like information asymmetry, resource asymmetry, and all sorts of gaps. And so when it comes to the execution of even very smart policies, we have to be really careful.
Can I just add something? I just heard the presentations of my colleagues from both Vietnam and Taiwan. Just to let you know that I was international juror for ICF. Yes, I have been a jury member for the last, I think, 7-8 years. And I have seen how your countries have deployed innovation. So the fundamental thing that was said about smart cities and they becoming intelligent and human-centered, there's one example I remember, and I gave the city from Taiwan a huge tick and heavy marks, is that it's a city called Hsinchu city. This is a city which won the award for intelligent city, and not because it deployed technologies, but because the mayor thought intelligently. And I'll just give a bit of a background. That particular town or city at one time was supposed to be a very highly productive city because it was in the business of making glass. Glass making was the business and it was thriving. But over the years, the glass-making business just died. And the city's economic vitality came down. And at that time, the mayor thought it's important to revive the city economically. And he came out with this innovation. What he did was he looked at the open spaces in the city, like the playgrounds, etc. And he invited all those people at one time who were involved in making glass, and made it into a hobby and called all the children and youngsters to say, you take classes in glassmaking. And the housewives were interested, youngsters were interested, and they started learning glassmaking all over again. And then he went to international investors and put a bit of money, and there were small startups that sprung up from that experiment. And it went on to becoming a good industry where they won patents for quadruple glazed glass. Not just ordinary glass, triple glazed, quadruple glazed glass. that is used in green buildings, and it became a thriving economy. Not much of deployment of technology. It won the Smart City Award only because the economic revival of the place based on an ancient art form that existed and started giving livelihoods to everyone. So, it's so enriching to be a part of the, jury to read about what Vietnam does, what Taiwan does, etc.
We are the first in Vietnam who got that.
All right.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's 5 o'clock now, and Professor Lin, any additional remarks on what is?
Thank you very much, Karuna, for reminding that what is Hsinchu City done. What I wanted to add or to supplement my presentation is that I would say that no policy is perfect. Okay, there is no so-called perfect policy, and every public policy might do something good, and of course it might do the bad effects on some other people or group of people. But still, we have to do that. Just like you have the mobile phone, you have the smartphone, and every time you initiate the application, using the app systems, you have to say agree, 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 right? You do everything agree, and you know that you are losing some of the privacy or some routines, but you like to enjoy the nice things of the technology. So we have to compromise somewhere. So
I think nobody would disagree to Professor Lin.
So that's the situation. So what I'm saying is that the presentation, I said, the model in Taiwan, just for your information, I'm not saying it's perfect. As a matter of fact, I would say that if a kind of response to what Professor O said, we are isolated from the university in that approach. See, because we are still keeping the traditional university approach. So that is totally unrelated to what I'm saying. So I think those are things that we might need to improve in the future. Thank you for that.
And Gwen, do you want to say any additional final remarks?
Yeah. Okay. For Phillips, when you talk about the smart city policy and we accept failure, in fact, in our province, we believe that the smart city policies is equivalent of startup policy. And if you make a startup, you have to accept the failure. Yeah. And I also share with all of you about the bottom-up or top-down, so, asymmetry of information. So depending on information flows and also the capacity of community, then we should say we should be a hybrid model, mixing between, and depending region, then you apply in different way. So that is what we are trying to do also. And of course, as you say, no one best way for smart city. And smart city is not everything. It's just, one concept. It's a concept. So you can follow it and build the most important in making better life for people, better environment for, for economy, for, growing society, etc. So that is the most important.
And Philip, just for your information, he's from the private sector. Thank you very much. And in fact, we have one question from the floor. And let me see. Just one second.
There are more than one.
I think you can throw it.
Let me just first. We have now 3 questions addressed through the system. So let me just maybe turn it on. Oops. Nowadays, the moderator job is really difficult. You have to be techie. It doesn't open.
Yeah, I think, thank you
maybe
for your...
Hello? Works. As you know, I come from Australia, and there's a big American conglomerate called Amazon, which most of you would be aware of. Anyhow, to make a long story short, they're going to build a superstore in Australia next year near the city of Melbourne. And they will be employing humanoid robots there, and they'll be able to meet you at the door. They'll be able to, if you need a hand, they'll greet you and ask you what you want. They'll be able to take your hand and show you where it is you're looking, or do anything else for you. They'll be the ones who will also check you out at the till, or whatever the method of payments going to be. Now, the question I want to ask is, or just as another bit of information, they'll be employing 33 people, where the other two major supermarkets in Australia, Coles and Woolworths, would employ an average of 230. So you can guess what's going to happen to the staff in Coles and Woolworths. They'll have to follow suit. But however, the question I want to ask is, I was listening to a technology expert about 4 months ago, and he was predicting that within 40 years we'll have a truly intelligent robot that can mimic the human brain in every respect, including original thinking, emotions, everything. We know we've got them pretty close to walking around and carrying on like human beings physically, but the brain's a different thing. My opinion is, if that ever happens, why would, when robots get numerous, which they will, why would they want us? My opinion is that'll be the final end of the human race, because I believe they'll just get rid of us as being inefficient. Would I just ask the panel, whoever likes to answer that, would they agree?
Between Mr. Gentleman?
Here has to answer, because he was talking about the 3 laws.
I'm not sure that I'm a poet, but in the paper I did talk about the fact that there is one thing technology cannot do. It cannot create, at least not in my lifetime, an artificial intelligence that will be able to organize people to work as a team, think and change things that come up suddenly, because these systems, the algorithms, are written by some people. The codes are inputted. So if the person that writes the code and those that give this direction are not there, the machine is not going to be able to truly mimic the human capacity for adaptation very quickly. I'll give you just an example. I was picked up by an Uber leaving my house to the airport, and I had forgotten my wristwatch. The driver said he will go back. So he made a U-turn. It turns out he has a different GPS that has Colonel, the KFC Colonel. His voice is on the GPS. He said, no, you're going the wrong way. The driver said, I'm going the right way. It responded, okay, then do it your way. What happens in such situations, the GPS is only going to where it has been programmed to go. But humans can turn around and move quickly. And I have faith if we coordinate, collaborate, and lastly, educate ourselves about our environment, the nature of our social relations, we will build intelligent machines to enhance our lives rather than degrade it or replace us.
Thank you, Kelechi.
I'd like to take a swing at John's question too, because he'll attack me tonight at dinner and then tomorrow morning, and so I might as well start the argument now, right? First, if that happens, it's our fault, which I think is what Kelechi was saying. Second, you're talking in capitalism, creative destruction. In just human terms, you're talking change. We, human beings, probably are the most adaptable species. That's why we're still surviving. But let's talk. This panel is about policy. So let's talk for a second about policy, because The fact of the matter is that, you know, and this is, in many societies we do it, we provide training, we provide skill sets for people. I mean, in our country it was the coal miners, it was manufacturing, and I have to say we don't do it adequately or enough. But that is really the key, is giving people different types of training so that they can adapt and manage their lives. I was part of a panel that actually dealt with this issue in terms of replacing human beings. And one of the things we came up with was the idea of artisanship. So, you know, when you have, I mean, this happened with mass manufacturing. You know, people look down on that from a qualitative standpoint when something is manufactured. And so really what you may see is a renaissance of human artisanship. The glass you were talking about, where humans make it, all of a sudden it becomes more valuable because it is made by a human who's a specialist, okay? So it's not that I don't think about the same things you do, but I think I have more, I believe in resilience and hope, and I do think we have the capability of managing that, but it does take good policy at both local and state and federal level to deal with that. So if I was a city that was running into that issue, then I'd be finding every, you know, resource I could to cross-train my people, to give them other avenues for, you know, resources and stuff. So there are strategies to deal with it.
Thanks, Philip. I have 3 more questions from the floor. 2 for Karuna and 1 for Nguyen. So let me just
the first question
first take care of these questions, and then we'll come to you after that. Hey, it doesn't work.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This question is for me.
Yeah, it's for you.
Thank you for your nice presentation. What is your practical solution to balance between tech evangelists and green evangelists? Wow. Okay. In most, I don't know who asked this question. Okay, you. What I have seen in most of the smart cities is that there is no discussion. It is mostly top down. So my suggestion would be that it would be very nice to have a bunch of people who work in the design space. I mean, they're design experts, and get the technology experts. Then, you know, have a dialogue and a discussion. For instance, if there are 2 ways you can make a net zero building, a completely zero energy guzzling building. One is through a fantastic design. You use the best design principles, you create a net zero building. But another building built like this can use technology, sensors, smart sensors, and still create a net zero building. I think the most important point would be to come, discuss it, and decide what is most appropriate, and arrive at a consensus through a good consensual process. And that is important. So I would recommend that every city do this.
Yeah. You have 1 more question, and it could be yes or no, but you can just expand a little bit more.
What is that?
You will see. Hey.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you have success story for smart city in India? Yes. I'd like to say that smart cities, there's nothing like a complete success story, as we have discussed. You know, most of the cities have done a bit of work here, whatever. But in India, we do have fairly success stories in the way that we have created technology incubators. We have a beautiful startup ecosystem as a part of the smart city. Then we have moved a fairly good distance in terms of deploying technologies to monitor our critical infrastructures functioning, for instance, our water supply, utilities, etc. Most of our 100 smart cities now have the command and control and command centers. So to that extent, we are getting a grip on the city assets, what we are losing in terms of ecological assets, as I mentioned. So we do have we made quite a bit of progress in terms of understanding universal infrastructure, public transportation, creating a startup and a good ecosystem to foster economic development. good stories.
Okay, thank you, Karuna. Now, for Gwen.
I'm really happy that people really like the story of the startup we are talking. Who posed a question, please? Thank you. The lesson we learned from the last failure of incubation is at that time we built a very nice incubator, but more hardware than software. And open ceremony, we even invite a leader from Google. So it's very nice, it's very, like one of you already mentioned, be careful, you should not go too deep on marketing and forget the reality, forget the real value. And at that time, we don't really have an ecosystem for the startup. Startup is not just building a nice hardware building, and call it an incubator and invite famous people come and then you have a startup. It doesn't work. So now we understand better. We work it in triple helix model. So it's a university who open incubator, but we also invite many big enterprise to support in financially, and also, startup to come and to share their point of view, what they want from incubator, and also link it with the smart city program of the whole province. So the government support us. We building the living lab. We have a fab lab. Many things. And university can connect each other, also other units. So it's not working alone. You work in ecosystem, and you got the support from the whole society. Then we gradually build up the startup culture, and then the startup work. So the software is very important, even more than the hardware, and the ecosystem is extremely important to build something new. What we learned from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. It's now 5:17. And do we close or do you want to continue?
There was a question.
Maybe we'll just have 2 more questions from the floor. And when you ask questions, please specify to which speaker your question is addressed to, just to save time.
But also the person's name who's
Yes.
asking the question.
Okay, I wanted to ask Phillips and other person who you can answer, it may be good. When we talk about smart city, we should think about absolute viewpoint and relative viewpoint. If government decide we're going to make smart city, why? We're going to satisfy citizen, people-centered. And how you can make people satisfied? It's very relative terms. People, when they feel happy, many other factors, impact how you can feel or you got the satisfaction. So we cannot answer relative viewpoint. You have no way to persuade them. But if you think the other way, if your job is hire more people from your citizen, then you can think about invite what kind of industry in your industrial park. You can make more jobs than other kinds. So you are very very persuasive in explaining what you are going to do. So this session is about policy, smart city policy. So we better not mention about relative viewpoint. We can answer it. For an example, if government do not have enough money, you can reduce your expenditure for traffics by providing some sensors all corner of the facilities. So we are very confident in doing that job, and we can reduce our expenditure. Okay, that's what I wanted to suggest. Thank you.
So I think you correctly identified that happiness as an indicator is a problem, okay? We actually did a lot of work in the United States with very sophisticated technology around social media. And there's a difference between sentiment analysis and emotional analysis, and you have to be very careful. And I think while people talk about happy cities, I mean, Dubai makes a big deal about being a happy city, but they use sentiment analysis. I think you're absolutely correct that that's not the indicator that you want to use. But when I had my slide, and Karuna talked about it, she said, you know, people, profits, and planet, I was talking about livability, workability, and sustainability. In each case, I gave about 6 examples of things that you could start, and what I talked about was measurement. So it's not relative and it's not absolute. It's even more complicated than that. It's systems-based, okay? So we talked about an ecosystem. So let me give you an example. You talked about bringing in an employer. So if you bring in an employer that produces waste, air pollution or water pollution, then what you've done is you've increased incidences of cancer deaths, stillbirths, all that kind of stuff. Yet you may have produced 1 million jobs, right? So it's a system-based approach. You have to look at both the environmental aspect of the employer that you bring in. You have to look at the jobs or economic. Do they bring in the kind of jobs? I mean, John was talking about bringing Amazon in, and Amazon only produces 20 jobs when the average would be 200 jobs, right? So if you're not doing a systems analysis and looking at the 3 factors, but how they're all interrelated, and measuring all of them and looking for what we call feedback loops, it's more complicated, actually, and than just relative or absolute, because it also changes over time. There's a very famous saying in systems analysis, and that is, today's solution is tomorrow's problem, okay? And you have to be able to see that when you bring in an employer in, you have to be in a position to say, how does it affect the local environment? Because if I have stillbirths and high pollution, then people are not going to be happy, right? Even though I have jobs. And that was the 3rd industrial revolution approach. We just wanted to create jobs, to heck with the planet and the people, right? So now in the 4th, as the president properly pointed out, you have to balance all 3. So I'm sorry that I can't give a simple answer, but it's actually a very complicated approach.
It is very complicated. I think UAE has a happiness index, but they are finding it very difficult to understand. Like in my own city, they have everything. They have a job, they live in good homes, they have a good relationships. Everything is happy, but they are so unhappy because they say we are stuck in traffic.
You're not talking about Korea, no? Okay.
So it's very, as you said, it's
our
very
last question from the floor.
Thank you very much, Moderator. My name is Dr. Umar Bindir. I'm an engineer by training, and I'm from Nigeria. I was recently reading a book on how Asia works by Joe Studwell. And my question is, probably will go to Phillips, because all these discussions about smart cities, I am constantly trying to measure how it works in developing countries, how it works in African countries. And there's no way you can use the word smart, and in developing countries you don't associate that with not just technology, but quality, smooth technology. So, now this session is about policy. In that book, he gave 3 indices, and he indicated countries that have succeeded. He mentioned Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and now China. And then later he mentioned Singapore. And he said, first, developing poor countries, most people are involved in agriculture, small-scale agriculture. So you've got to get that right. And as you develop, you move into manufacturing. So you employ a lot of people making consumable things. And then you move to understand finances. Now, when you pull all this and look at developing countries, and this session is about policy, and in developing countries, policy is about government statements. Philip earlier said, don't wait for elections, just get on with it. But in developing countries, elections produce leaders, and leaders guides policies. And if you don't wait for policy or elections, there is a problem. So I want him to make a statement. But finally, my remark is to my brother. I think when he was making his presentation, I don't know whether it's excitement or whatever. He was mentioning countries, and he mentioned Biafra. And I want him to edit that, to change it with Nigeria, because Biafra, for this forum, does not exist as a country, and it is not a recognized territory to be mentioned in an international forum of this nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comment? Being from the development business, I was at the World Bank, almost selling the packages for almost 2 decades. The policies or policy framework should be tailored to sort of, address the situations of the country, macroeconomic environment facing the country. For example, we cannot just sell the medicine for really sort of strong men for the sick people. Likewise, we cannot just do the vice versa. It's not a good one. So all the time, the troubling thought is, whether we understand the specific local situations well enough to prescribe any sort of advice and policy advice or project advice. So, I'm with you because this is also, I'm sure that everybody shares the same view. Yes.
I want to be clear. I'm going to answer both questions. What I read to you were events and or cities, not countries. I said Hiroshima, that's not a country, Nagasaki, Armenia, the Holocaust, indigenous people in Americas and in Australia, Biafra, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then Rwanda. All of these are connected with decisions people made. All I'm saying, if you read the whole paper, I don't have faith that if you leave power in the hands of very interested individuals, that they would not misuse it. These are examples of this. Now, with regard to Stockwell's book you're mentioning, that is a very old argument. It goes back to modernization theory, the staged process that continues to ask less developed countries, look to. In fact, it's so old. It's in the Asiatic mode of production by Karl Marx, 1849, thereabout, that says the Asian countries needed to look to the industrialized countries, and then the Marxists who don't understand the capitalist theory are saying, Africans, we need to look to these other folks. Yeah, you're an engineer. You all like to solve problems. I love it. But the policies that undergird what we do, quite frequently in the case of Nigeria, are not indigenous. They are driven by outside interest. And if you challenge me on that, I'll give you specificity. What we need is an internal conversation about the country and the sources of not just our revenue, but our ideas and how these ideas enhances our common humanity. I did not mention Biafra as a country. I was 6 years old, and I know what I'm talking about when the war occurred. I lost 4 people in the war. But what I'm actually referencing, if you read the paper, was the idea that starvation is a tool of war. And I have the paper for that, even though the person that made the policy later on tried to say no, that wasn't the case.
Okay, thank you very much. Now it's 5:30. It's time to close. And I personally think that we had a great, sort of useful discussion session this time. And I thank all my speakers for their dedicated time, dedicated the presentation, and also dedicated attention to also our heated discussions. And also thank our audience for continued attention to what we are saying. And I'm sure that our discussions were would be a good provide a reference for your future work. And thank you very much. And we deserve, I think, as a good applause, right? Thank you.
Thank you once again, the moderator Song Kyung-Soon, to lead the panel discussion. Thank you also to all participants for your passionate participants. Thank you very much. Participation. Thank you very much once again. So now it has come to the end of today's all programs, but your welcome dinner will continue starting from 6 at ICC Hotel. So please join us in the welcome dinner. Thank you so much once again. 다시 한번 함께해 주신 여러분께 감사 인사드리겠습니다. 감사합니다.